Soundstripe.
Well, it's the Victoria Day, the May 2-4 version of the Exit Philosophy podcast. I'm Scott MacArthur. That's Richard Griffin. And I want to say happy anniversary. Are we now identifying the Victoria Day Monday, Griff, as one of the most important anniversaries in the annals of this 40-some-year-old franchise, the Toronto Blue Jays, in its history?
I certainly am. The anniversary of Vlad not being in the lineup.
Vlad,
4 o'clock every morning on Victoria Day, I sit bolt upright and scream.
So context is everything, of course. You were running the Blue Jays media relations department in 2019. That was your first year doing that. And the Blue Jays had returned from a road trip to San Francisco and Chicago, where they played the White Sox. And of course, it's the Sunday afternoon getaway day game to return home to open a series against the division rival Boston Red Sox with a day game on the holiday Monday. And Vladdy, again, context is everything, Griff. There was nothing other than Vladdy's and Bo's arrivals at the big league level that season to look forward to. There was nothing going on. That was a 95-loss team. And Vladdy wasn't in the lineup on that holiday Monday afternoon. And at least Twitter, I don't know if the entire fan base, but at least Twitter went mad.
Well, let me give some background on that. Let me lend some background. First of all, Charlie Montoya was making the lineup out, and he had that load management thing going. Vlad had played 9 straight games, including every game in San Francisco, every game against the White Sox, no off day coming home. So I'm in the clubhouse, and I'm looking at the lineup on the screen in the clubhouse, and Justin Smoke is playing first base, and I'm going, Maybe Charlie should think about having Vlad in there, but I'd only been at the job for 3 months. And, this load management thing seemed to be working all right. It was only a month and a half into the season. It was May 20th, in fact, was the date. And so I stuck my head in Montoya's office. I just, Charlie, are you sure about Vlad not playing? It's a holiday. And he said, no, we're going to do it like that. And I would have to say that coming from 35 years in Quebec, we don't celebrate Victoria Day there. It's Saint Jean-Baptiste. If this was Saint Jean-Baptiste Day,
June 24th, man.
Story for me. But Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro never celebrated our Victoria Day either. And in fact, the last time the Royals meant anything in Montreal was when the Montreal Royals played there and left in 1960. So I think I can be excused for not realizing the importance to the 26,700 people who chose to come out on Victoria Day looking to see Vlad. But Vlad had also played 8 home games so far. He came up in late April, played every day. Went on the road trip, played every day, hit his first 2 home runs in that first game in San Francisco. And it was great. I mean, there were 2 Korean teenage men who caught the home run, came down to the clubhouse. Everything was going so well. They gave Vlad the ball. They had pictures taken with him. I still have the pictures on my camera, on my phone. And so everything was going great. Chicago, he played well. And then, not in the lineup, the Twitterverse reacts as such. And in the 3rd inning, we have to announce that Vlad was Player of the Week in the American League, which, of course, served to calm down the masses, right?
Oh, yeah.
No. So I have not forgotten that Victoria Day debacle. Victoria Day doesn't mean the same to me. I mean, it used to be in Quebec that buying a 2-4 and heading north wasn't just Victoria Day, it was every weekend, you know? So like somebody had to tell me that it was so important to the 26,000 people there. I still don't get it, but I understand, and I do a mea culpa every Victoria Day.
Oh, well, we appreciate that, Griff. Those of us who are offended. So you're telling me that there were no controversies in the early 1980s when load management didn't exist and Tim Raines didn't play on June 24th, Saint Jean Baptiste? Telling me there would never be any major controversies. There was no social media, I know. So
yeah, but this is also the Saint Jean Baptiste Society hated baseball, so we were good there. They bought the whole upper deck one Saint Jean Baptiste Day. They bought the whole upper deck, and their parade ended at home plate. And then they were going to disperse and go to the upper deck, and it was going to be a sellout. Every ticket was sold at Olympic Stadium. And it turns out that the parade ended at home plate, and then everybody left. So it was an empty upper deck, and we announced like 40,000 people. We announced 40,000 people, and there was nobody in the upper deck. So it never became a controversy because the Société Saint Jean Baptiste hated baseball. All good.
I knew about Saint Jean Baptiste Day. I had no idea there was a Société Saint Jean Baptiste. It was okay. Well, there you go.
I was not named an honorary member ever, so it's all
right. Yeah, my only feeling.
Neither will I ever be named an honorary member of the Royalist Society if there is one.
Oh, come on, you're down with Chuck.
Victoria Day.
Yeah, you're down with Chuck.
That was one of the low moments of my career, I must say.
Totally. The Saint Jean Baptiste, or 4 years ago.
The Victoria Day, and not advising Charlie that how important it was, and standing in his office until he changed the lineup and saying, "I'm not leaving," and like handcuffing myself to his chair or something.
But like Griff, I was working on the broadcasts that day, and I remember seeing the lineup and noticing that Vlad wasn't in it. And call me spaced out. And if you do, you wouldn't be the first, the second, the third, or the fourth, and you certainly won't be the last. I remember it not occurring to me when I saw the lineup on the clubhouse wall that Vladdy not playing might be a problem. And then I got upstairs into the broadcast booth, and I pull up TweetDeck, as I usually do. I got my little routine, and the next thing I know, people are angry about this. And I remember thinking at the time, I get it from this perspective. What I said earlier, which was, that was a 95 loss team in the middle of a rebuild, and it was Vladdy came up in late April. Bo arrived 5 or 6 weeks later, and those were the two debuts that everybody was looking forward to, because there was nothing else that season, unless a Trent Thornton start turned you crank. Right. Or Derek Law coming in a leverage situation got your gears going. There wasn't much to look forward to. So I thought, okay, Victoria Day, it's the unofficial start of summer. It's a holiday Monday. The kids aren't in school. It might be, and I don't know for how many people, but it might be the one day where the family jumps in the car, heads down to the stadium, and attends a Blue Jays game.
I still don't, Scotty, I still don't understand. I still don't get why that 26,700 fan base was more important than any other. And that if Vlad had sat out one game, what difference one made to the other. It was a compelling David Price, Edwin Jackson matchup on the mound.
You're half right.
Well, Edwin Jackson had just joined the Jays, and the Hall of Fame had asked for his cap in his first start in San Francisco, because it was his 13th I believe,
Yes.
13th major league team. So
Yeah.
like his hat is in the Hall of Fame. Vlad Jr.'s isn't yet. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's right. Edwin Jackson's a Hall of Famer, and Vlad at this point is not. Anyway, yeah. So I have no recollection of the result of that day. I'm presuming Boston won because the Jays. Yeah, I think you guys had won half of your first 24 games or so. You did well out in Oakland in April, and then the reality set in.
Yeah.
The whole thing, Griff, really was going back, because context is everything. The whole thing, I think, really was Ross and Mark aren't Canadian and they don't appreciate Canada, and they this and that. There's still some people who love to talk that way. I think it's.
I was just going to suggest that before you said that. So we're in agreement on that. In any case, is that these guys came across the lake from Cleveland, and even though it was in their fourth season and had been to the playoff in 2016 with Alex Anthopoulos' roster, then rebuilt the farm system and were creating this situation, even though Vlad was signed by the previous regime. I believe that was a huge part of it. It was a reaction to Americans and a guy from Montreal not understanding. So,
yeah. All right. Well, it's
the guy from Montreal.
You're counting the days to June 24th now, aren't you? It's June 24th is a Saturday this year, so maybe we should do a special episode of Exit Philosophy on Saturday, June the 24th. If we can drag you out of church,
we'll get a 24 of Labatt sans compte.
What?
Go to it,
What? I was at my cousin's house for a get together with a few people yesterday, and a guy who I only met. Well, I had met before, but a couple was there, friends of my cousin and her husband, and he was a 50 drinker.
Oh, parfait.
And apparently it's I guess really hard to find in Ontario. He was a little vexed. I like that word about that.
Across from the Rogers Center, I was watching the end of the PGA Championship yesterday, and I looked in the beer fridge, and there were 8 bottles of Labatt 50, and I went, "Oh, I got to come here more."
There you go. Were they right beside the Molson Export? I always feel like it's 50 and X. Absolument. You cross that border into Quebec, and you're not living the Quebec life if you're not drinking one of those 2 beers.
So let's get to the.
I was going to say, let's drill
the week.
Yeah, so it's Monday, May 22nd as we record this. So always like to timestamp it in case you're listening a little further down the road. And the Jays have just wrapped up. I think it's fair to say an unsuccessful homestand of 10 games. They swept the Atlanta Braves. They looked good on the first 2 nights doing it. And then they won a sloppily played game a week ago yesterday. And then the division stuff started. The Yankees come in, and that was a shit show in a lot of ways. And the Baltimore series didn't look good either. So they go to Tampa Bay to kick off a road trip, continue in the division as we sit here on Monday morning, May the 22nd. And Griff, I'm going to frame it this way. Baseball is a 162 game season. And whether it's you or it's me, like, we all get caught up in our emotions, things that we care about. And when you're a fan or even sometimes a casual observer, but you want to see a team do well, it amazes me that we get so caught up in our emotional thinking that we react in a way that forgets that baseball seasons have ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys every single year. What bugs me the most right now about the Toronto Blue Jays, and they've lost 10 of their last 11 divisional games. If you go back to Fenway Park 3 weeks ago, right, getting swept in 4 at Fenway, losing 3 of 4 at home to the Yankees, and getting swept by the Orioles. And they've got the Rays coming up. So we're not there yet, even if you're listening halfway through the Rays series as we're sitting here, we're not there yet. What bothers me the most isn't the losing, because I can accept that over the course of a long season. It's that it felt like amateur hour repeatedly all week. The game got too quick for some of the players. The game got too quick for the manager. I thought they focused way the hell too much on Aaron Judge and carried that out publicly way too much, when really they should have just focused on mitigating what they may have been tipping. The management of the bullpen is something else we can talk about, and just simple things like Brandon Belt doubling and then getting himself thrown out at third base on a ground ball that he never should have tried to advance to third base on, ground ball to the shortstop. Guys getting in their heads, trying to do too much. Examples of the game overwhelming them all week long bothers me more than the losing itself.
I was going to couch this and describe this in terms that a maritimer like yourself would understand. But it reminded me of the ebbs and flows of the Bay of Fundy, where when the tide's out, you see the garbage rubber tires in the bottom of on the mud. You see these little creatures running around that you've never seen before. But when the tide comes back in, and you know it will because it has for centuries, then it's beautiful. The sun's shining off the water, and that's what you're there for. But you know it's coming back. It's just that when the tide is out, you see the warts and all of what men do to nature. How do you like that?
I think that was as keen a stretch as we've had in the early days of this podcast. The analogy, I think you stretched that elastic band far enough that it came back without ripping, but if you take it in any further, it probably would have snapped on you. I always remember, and John Gibbons,
go.
John Gibbons didn't invent this phrase, Griff, but he certainly liked to say it, right? And yeah, Richard, you know, when a team's not hitting, it looks lifeless, Richard. Right? When a team's not hitting, it looks lifeless. And this team is hard to watch right now because it's not hitting. And it's not coming up with the clutch, RISP, runners in scoring position hits. How do they like their coffee? Not RISP these days. That was one I always threw out in the press box to eye rules. But, you know, they're not clutch. In Sunday's game, a couple of crucial double plays, nixed rallies, George Springer, Kevin Kiermaier later in the ball game. I know they lost in extras, but it's just not happening right now. And when it's not happening offensively for a team, it looks almost like they're not trying, which of course isn't the case. In some cases, they're trying too hard.
I checked it out this morning, but if they had scored, because this is a team that should score at least 4 or 5 runs per game. If they had scored 5 runs every game so far, they would have won 29 games to this point. So to put the blame on anything else but what you're talking about, the clutch hitting, etc., you know, all you got to do is look at Bo, who's starting to chase now, and he was in the zone when the supporting cast was also hitting. Now he's starting to chase, especially in big situations. Vlad not swinging the bat the way that he can and will. So like it's a snowball in terms of people looking around for someone to come up clutch, and that goes to the bullpen, where all of a sudden, when you're not scoring any runs in late innings, you're asking the bullpen to be perfect, and they're not. And we saw that in probably 3 or 4 games. But we were discussing before we went on, how much of this do you put on the coaching staff and the ability to exude confidence to their team?
Well, I come back to what I felt was amateur hour. And look, we did our second episode last Monday, and we maligned the final game of the Braves series. I mean, they won that game, but not because they didn't have a loaded rifle pointed and shooting repeatedly at their own feet. I mean, the Braves, the Braves defended in the outfield on Sunday like they'd never played baseball before, like they never had outfield practice, fly balls hit to them. And so that gave the Jays a chance to take that game. And we were talking about a lack of attention to detail. And I touched on what I felt was the over obsession with what Aaron Judge was doing with his eyes, rather than mitigating whatever it was that a teammate or a coach or a bunch of teammates or coaches were picking up and relaying to Aaron Judge and Jake Bauers, by the way. Nobody was booing Jake Bauers I was at the game on Thursday night. Nobody was booing Jake Bauers when he came up, but Aaron Judge is the great villain because he's the best player in the sport east of Anaheim. Well, I don't want to offend Vladdy fans. I love him too, but I think Aaron Judge is just at that level right now. So I didn't like how they handled the Aaron Judge situation so publicly. The Domingo Germán stuff was different. He actually did cheat. He had crap on his hands.
But that's been overlooked because everybody's focused on the other.
Because the focus. So then there's that. There is the whole thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's the second visit.
I was getting to that. The second visit.
His second visit to talk to Manoah, and like people are blaming either Pete Walker or Don Mattingly for not stopping John Schneider from going to the mound, even though it was a second visit and he had to take him out. But the circumstances of that visit were that on a check swing, Adam Frazier was called out and complained, and Alek Manoah started in yelling at Adam Frazier. And that's something where my belief is that John Schneider said, I got to go stop that. And he wheels around the corner of the dugout, up the steps. And Pete Walker and Mattingly probably thought that he was going out there to replace him. Would have had to think that because Tim Meza was warming up and there were 4 left-handed hitters in a row coming up. And so they wouldn't have stopped him. They would have said, well, you know, I wish he had talked to us, but it's an emotional time and an emotional moment. But there's no need to grab him and say, John, what are you doing? It's the second visit. He knew, like he should have known it was a second visit. And that's just what you said about that homestand moving too quickly, getting in people's heads. And once it gets in the heads of the coaching staff and the manager, the players sort of come undone a little bit. And we saw that happening.
Do you remember? Of course you remember. 2013. So Alex Anthopoulos goes and gets pretty much anybody who was making a paycheck worth talking about on the Miami Marlins. And then a month later, he engages the purview and acquires we'll conversate about this later, Griff. He acquires R.A. Dickey from the New York Mets. And now you're looking around, you're going, well, you got Jose Reyes, you've got Mark Burley, you've got Josh Johnson. Yeah, that in a lot of ways that was the crux of the trade. Yeah. And
he was sadly an emerging ace.
Yeah, and sadly Josh Johnson's arm fell off, but anyway, so you had star power. And at the time, now he's viewed very differently and for good reason now, but at the time, bringing back John Gibbons, and there was the whole context of trusting your manager after the John Farrell, my dream job bullshit with Boston and blah, 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 blah. But the feeling was John Gibbons hasn't been a manager since he was fired by the Blue Jays. I mean, if you're going to have a team full of star-studded players, don't you need to go and get a name in that dugout? You could take it 10 years to now and ask that same question. I don't give a crap, to be honest, about, who's in that dugout as long as I have confidence in him. And I keep thinking of Bruce Bochy and his size 14 head, Griff. And I mean, it would have been hell for the equipment person to find a ball cap that fit. But Texas did it. San Francisco did it. San Diego did it years before that. I mean, Bruce Bochy was a name. This is a Blue Jays team that is ready to win now. Vlad is in his prime. He's still young, but he's in his prime. Bo Bichette is entering his prime years, still young, but he's a now guy. He's not a kid that you're projecting 2 to 3 years out, hoping to be part of a core that wins. He's part of a core that you expect to win now. Look at their starting rotation. If Manoah gets it together, they got an excellent starting rotation. This is a team that's supposed to win. And John Schneider may very well be an organizational guy and the right guy for this moment. But when I'm watching and feeling like the manager's overwhelmed in the dugout, that if I'm feeling it, surely people closer to it and smarter than me are feeling it, whether they'll admit to it or not. And that does not inspire confidence when you need a turnaround relatively quickly because you're playing in the toughest and best division in the sport.
Well, I got 3 examples for you in sort of counter examples of what you're talking about. And you know, Schneider has been around. He goes back to Danny Jansen when he was an 18-year-old kid. He managed Bo and Vlad, and that was important to the organization at the time. And he had stood next to Charlie Montoyo for the last 2 years as a bench coach. So he knew, you know, the dugout environment. It didn't overwhelm him. But 2 examples for you that sort of go against your argument or sort of soften it a little bit is when Terry Francona went from the Phillies to the Red Sox. And at the time that when he went over there, he was 78 games under 500 as a manager, and went in there and won the first World Series since 1918 in Boston. Then you had Joe Torre, who was 109 games under 500 as a manager when he went to the Yankees, and the headline in the Post was Clueless Joe. I mean, that's a fine welcome for a guy who's now in the Hall of Fame. And not to say John Schneider's going to the Hall of Fame, but there are situations where a team is ready to win and they bring in a guy that was an unpopular choice or was a choice that was questioned at the time, and he comes through. Even Buck Showalter, at the same age as John Schneider, was barely over 500 and had not won anything yet. And look at him now. I mean, he's considered the gold standard of current major league managers in terms of being a micromanager and a bit of an asshole. But you know, like
Griff, I was at the game on Thursday night, and I kept looking out at the new bullpen, and I wondered to myself, what must have the winter been like for Zach Britton sitting out there while all the renovations were being done?
Well, there you go. I mean, yeah.
No, but each of those examples, there was previous big league managing experience. So if your argument is based in Francona learned some tough lessons in Philadelphia, Joe Torre learned some tough lessons in St. Louis, Buck Showalter learned some tough lessons with the Yankees, including the whole cotton polyester uniform disaster on Seinfeld, or in Arizona, running an expansion team before it handed the keys to Bob Brenly, and he won a World Series and then never managed again. I mean, those are guys who may have learned the craft elsewhere. I'm not sitting here saying John Schneider's not a major league manager or won't be a very good major league manager. What I'm saying is I have concerns about some of the things that I saw this week in terms of the game speeding up. And I don't know if this is the time in this franchise's contention window to have a manager learning his craft at this level.
Well,
when the expectations are what they are.
But you know, all the examples of managers that I brought up who were successful with Francona, Torre, Showalter, that was a different era of managing too. I mean, I'm sort of putting a but in this argument because Now John Schneider's there and he knows what the organization is thinking. He's heard from the analytics people every day, just like Charlie Montoya did, just like 29 other managers do. And if he's able to handle a balance between managing players and managing numbers, then that's what they're looking for. And it's different than when Showalter and Francona and Torrey came in. But we now have questions on whether he is able to handle the managing players part. For instance, we talked about Eric Swanson being lifted the other day and Romano coming in to face O'Hearn and O'Hearn hitting a 3-run homer to tie the game.
Yeah.
The worst Swanson could have done if he stayed in was give up that same 3-run homer for a tie game. But did Romano expect to come in that situation? That's to get 4 outs when a guy that they traded Teoscar for is on the mound and he's your second closer. He's the guy that you have put great faith in because you traded away your biggest slugger and home run guy.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I want to poke my eyeballs out with a hot butter knife every time I hear somebody say, we've got to find a window for Tim Meza. Okay. Well, you're finding a window for Tim Meza. I'm going to find one to jump out of because you can't, this is not a loogie world where you've got lefty specialists who can come in and get a left-handed hitter out and then you can lift them. This is not that world.
How about Meza? Let's bring him into this conversation. Because when it was a second mound visit unexpectedly for Schneider and he had to bring in Meza, there were 4 left-handed hitters coming up. He got one. And if he had left him in to pitch the next inning, which is why he had been warming up quickly, if he had left Meza in to pitch the next inning, O'Hearn would have been pinch hit for. There were 2 other left-handers because Jansen had hit a home run to put the Jays ahead in that game. So they likely would have taken 2 of their left-handed hitters, gone deep into their bench, and O'Hearn wouldn't have come up against Romano and hit that home run. So, you know, it all sort of links together in one despicably bad week of baseball. But like the Bay of Fundy, the tide will be in shortly.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're too, we believe they're too good. We believe they're too good for this to last too long. I can even separate my quibbles with bullpen management and the handling of the Aaron Judge situation and the unknown or forgotten about second visit to the mound that required Manoah to be pulled. I mean, that's legitimate to me, attention to detail stuff or how you handle controversy stuff that I wasn't comfortable with. The bullpen management, Griff, I will sit there sometimes and I will ask myself, does John Schneider, if you injected him with truth serum, is he making this move because he believes it's the right move? Or is he making this move because that little piece of paper that he has in his hand when he hits the top of the dugout steps and then slips into his back pocket is telling him, if you don't do this right now, there's going to be somebody in your office after the game doing a 15-minute breakdown of this decision and why it was wrong. So I better go out there and I better put this guy in. Otherwise, I'm going to hear about it in my office after the game.
I'm not so sure that would be the result, but I do believe curse the windows for pitchers and what would be the best time for them to come in. I believe that John Schneider and Pete Walker, especially Schneider, would go, well, if we don't bring Meza in here, we may not get to use him. And he had a green light on the sheet pregame. So we got to bring him in here. Our guy is throwing 95 pitches. So let's bring him in here because it says on the sheet that this is a spot where 3 straight hitters, because that's the minimum that you have to face unless you finish an inning. But these 3 hitters are his. And so I think that is the downfall of the way John Schneider's been handling the bullpen, and sometimes that you're going with the sheet because this is the opportunity to bring a guy in. If I don't bring Meza in now, there won't be another opportunity in this game because we're in the 7th inning already. And
Right.
so I blame that. I don't think somebody will be sitting in his office criticizing his pitching. I think that he just wants to show that he's going by the analytics book.
Okay, so then that for me is paralysis by overanalysis. You can lay out a plan, we get 6+ out of Manoah or 4+ or 5, like whatever. If the game goes this way, da 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 da. If the game goes that way, da da. But the game and a game each and every day is its own entity. It has its own flow. It has its own vibe. You to me, if you're, I don't know how to describe this any better than it's like, okay, I have a square peg right now, and I don't care what shape the hole is. I am going to jam this square peg into the triangle or the circle. I mean, I'm going to hope it's a square so that it perfectly fits. But even if it isn't, we got to go there today. And it's, there's a.
Well, I agree with that, and I think that it's wrong. And I think that in terms of this Blue Jays bullpen, the wild card to earning a wild card is going to be Nate Pearson. Every bullpen has a guy that comes in and can throw 100 miles an hour. Every bullpen needs that guy. Every bullpen in a big situation where the hitter's squeezing the bat a little and he's feeling the pressure needs to be facing a guy in the 7th or 8th inning, whatever that situation might be where the game's on the line, needs to be facing a guy like Nate Pearson who can bring it. And Pearson's breaking stuff. He's now throwing more for strikes. He can be effective, but his history hasn't showed up on those analytics sheets yet. So in terms of not trying to fit, in terms of ignoring the square pegs and the round holes, let's see what he can do. I believe there's plenty of time left for him to find a significant role in the bullpen like the Twins have and the Mariners have and the Orioles have, guys that can really bring it, don't have a closer designation, but are very important. And the Jays need to find that to support Swanson and Jimmy Garcia and Romano.
I think it's late enough into the season now, Griff, that we can start to talk. It's a quarter of the way in, yeah. I mean, and we're what now? I actually do love how there's only, yeah, but I do love how there's only one trade deadline now because you gotta have it figured out by July 31st or it ain't happening.
Right.
As opposed to this whole everybody and their dog, not Alex Rios back in the day, but pretty much everybody and their dog clears waivers in August. And so the trade deadline really was the 31st of that month until the rules changed. So we've got a little more than 2 months to go here before the possibility of Shohei Ohtani, who's a free agent at the end of the year, being moved. And I'm thinking our old pal, Perry Minasian, the general manager of the Angels, they're not out of it, Griff. They're 3 games back of the last wild card spot in the American League. You know who's 2.5 games back of the 3rd wild card spot in the American League as we sit here on Monday morning, May the 22nd? The Toronto Blue Jays. So if the Blue Jays are still in it, we know they are, the Angels are too until they fall off the map, which hasn't happened yet. Do you keep Shohei Ohtani if you're in the mix? Because remember, you're not one and gone in a wild card play-in game anymore. You've got a best of 3 series to play, and Shohei's going to pitch game 1 or maybe game 2. He's going to pitch one of the games. Do you move him to get assets in return, or do you need to keep him for the stretch run because Mike Trout isn't playing baseball forever and ever and ever and needs, when the Angels have a chance, to be playing meaningful August baseball and maybe even September baseball?
Yeah, I think that ownership needs to respect the fans in Anaheim, and to go for it this year. I mean, ownership knows that they have had the two best players in baseball and still haven't come close to sniffing a postseason berth. And if this is the year, then they have to do it, whether Ohtani is a free agent at the end of the year or not. I mean, if they have any hope of re-signing Ohtani, which probably is not likely unless they go deep into October. So say they don't and they still lose him, I think it's worth it to stay the course and try and add to what they have. And as you said, give Trout the feeling that they are not going to rebuild. They're not rebuilding. They're not looking to 2 years down the road. That they want to do it now. I think it's important for that fan base, probably for baseball, Major League Baseball as well.
I'm intrigued by the possibility of them moving him. And could they talk themselves in to a deal if it includes a consequential young major league player? Like, it's not, if you're 10 games out of the last wild card spot on July 31st, the conversation we're having right now, Griff, is completely irrelevant. But if you're occupying one of the wild card spots, or you're close like the Angels are, if you got a 4 or 5 asset return that did include future pieces, but also included a young piece or two that's big league ready or playing in the big leagues already, could you talk yourself into doing that deal? The flip side of the equation, of course, is teams that would be acquiring Shohei Ohtani would have to be willing to part with pieces off of their current roster, and if
they would have to be competing for the postseason as well. And
that's my point. So would you want to be
to give up a pair of major league ready prospects?
Exactly.
Is sort of, I mean, what you're going to get likely for Ohtani at the trade deadline is a team that needs one piece and a huge piece and is willing to give up younger players. But I don't think it's realistic to say that that the Angels could acquire 2 players that are ready to play right now and help them still compete for the postseason. It's like even young players that are ready to play for 2024, I don't think that they could count and tell their fans that, hey, these 2 guys are going to help us as much as Ohtani did. And we're going to be competing next season. I think that's unrealistic. The fans there are probably sick of hearing that. And a team that's giving up players for Ohtani right now isn't going to be giving up too many players that are less than a year away from the bigs.
Yeah, I got to say, I don't envy Perry Manassian, Alex Anthopoulos' old AGM here in Toronto. I don't.
Well, I envy him because 15 years ago, he was working in the Texas Rangers clubhouse and guys were throwing stained underwear in his face to put in the washing machine. And now look at him. Look at him now.
Now he's running the Los Angeles Angels. I mean, I envy him, and he's got one of the 30 jobs.
In that light, yes.
Yeah. I envy him in that he's got one of the 30 jobs on this planet that I would love to have and will never be qualified for. But I don't envy. It is a needle through a haystack. No, that's not good. Finding a needle.
You're mixing analogies.
Yeah, what's that little the thimble? I've screwed it all up.
Camel through the eye of a needle, I think.
Yeah, you've got to thread the needle here to come out looking good on this. If you're Perry Manassian and the Angels in general with the whole Ohtani thing, you really got to thread the needle, and I think a lot of that is going to come out on the back end if you do make a trade of the pieces you acquire working out. Yeah. So you can't even really assess it. But if you do trade Shohei Ohtani, you're not getting the best player in the deal by a long shot.
And God bless Perry, but that decision ultimately isn't going to be the baseball front office. It's going to be the owner and what his plan is moving forward. And so like that decision.
And he may be looking to sell the team.
Shoulders. Yeah. But if you're selling the team and that's if you're selling the team and you've traded Ohtani at the deadline, it depends what you get back and what the new owner is looking for sure.
Well, and Griff, if you're selling the team, I just, when you listen to the Rosenthals and the Passons of the world, the people who are best plugged in across baseball, the Angels are just never mentioned as a team that has a chance of securing Ohtani long term. So this comment probably doesn't mean anything, but do you want a $500 or $600 million 15-year contract on your books when you're going to sell the team?
Yeah. On the other,
doesn't matter how great,
right.
Doesn't matter how great the player is. It doesn't make sense when you're going to sell.
I think another thing that you have to consider is when you talk about the sources and the plugged in major league media members, like who are they plugged into? Some are plugged into Scott Boras and agents. Some are plugged into MLB. And then you have to take it with a grain of salt when they mention it. For instance, like the Leafs' new GM, you get suggestions that Stan Bowman could be this market, that would be very difficult for this market to support. But it's that media member, to me, is just trying to show support for Stan Bowman so that somewhere down the line, when he does get back into hockey, he'll be able to call him and get inside him. Hey, remember when I supported you for the GM's in Toronto? And so you have to consider the source of the information when it comes to media members and who they're plugged into.
Mm-hmm. The world is, baseball reporting is no different than any other industry, media or not. I mean, the world is built on relationships, right? And friendships, or at least comfortable working relationships, whatever the case may be. Griff, we're running low on time here, so we've got to plug Griff's The Pitch, and we're putting a call out, man. You're doing awesome work each and every week. You're consistent in not just the quantity but the quality. So where can people? Because a lot of people have read you more than they've heard you. So where can they read your work?
It's griffsthepitch.com, and we've got the weekly power rankings, columns, game stuff. We're going to be adding more conversations with former players, and we'll be pumping out this podcast version of it on griffsthepitch.com. And I'm going to start charging, put up a wall, pay, subscribe, as of June 1st. So that's the date.
You're finally listening to me, Griff. I've been telling you, man. I've been telling you, build that wall. Gotta build that wall, man.
I got at least 100 feet of wall, just like the president.
Oh God, I probably stepped in one there. And just to let you know, I mean, you can get us on YouTube, youtube.com/exit philosophy. And Griff and I have been talking off air about some additional things that we'd like to do with that page. We will be making those ideas public when we lock them down in stone. And we hope that that's going to happen soon. So youtube.com/exit philosophy. And I think, remember, Griff, we're both from the Stone Age. I think we finally figured out all of the uploading issues we've been having. So we're pumping this out each and every Monday on the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to be, look for us, Exit Philosophy with Griff and Scotty Mack. Big week for the Jays, Griff, to tie a bow on all of this. They're in Tampa for 4. All these, because you're playing 13 games against your division now, 2 home, 2 road series. So you're getting a 4-game series, whether it's a home series or a road series. So another one of these 4-game sets with the Rays this week, and then it's off to Minneapolis. It's a tough stretch of the schedule for the Jays. It's not getting any easier.
And as the crabs on the mud of the Bay of Fundy say, roll tide. And they're hoping that tide's coming in that will propel the bullpen. Starting pitchers have been consistent and really good. So the base is there for the offense to start supporting the starting pitching, and for the bullpen to be placed in roles that they're comfortable with and they're made for in order to win some games and get back on track. But we see that coming. It's just that it was a very tough 8 days, including that Atlanta Sunday where they managed to win a game. But we're looking forward to next week. We're looking forward to all the new projects that we've been talking about. And I really enjoyed this, Scotty. Thanks.
If the crabs on the Bay of Fundy really say roll tide, they're about to be hearing from the lawyer for the University of Alabama football team's booster club. All right, roll tide, roll tide.
Hey, I think they're the right color, though.
We'll do it again next week. Exit Philosophy. Thanks for listening.